Hello everyone, I'm forecaster Jack Sillin here with today's tropical weather discussion video for July 6th, 2020. We'll start off discussing Tropical Storm Edouard. It's the only system currently active in the Atlantic with a name, and it is located south-southeast of Newfoundland. Not expecting any impacts from this. It's going to be racing off to the northeast and basically not doing anyone any harm. Except for any ships that might be traversing the Atlantic up here. You can see it's not a particularly strong storm. A little area of convection here displaced a bit northeast from the center of circulation, which is partially exposed. So we tropical storm, not doing anything in the way of impacts. Ensemble guidance, very confident that this is just going to keep racing off to the northeast without much in the way of impacts. So how about any other systems that we're talking about today? Well, this is the one that's going to be bringing the most impacts to the U.S. It is already dropping heavy rain across parts of northern Florida, southwestern Georgia. This is the center of this system right here over southwestern Georgia, and it did acquire a little bit of a low-level center of circulation, not strong enough to be deemed a tropical depression or storm by the National Hurricane Center before it moved onshore in Florida last night. But this is basically going to be the focal point for showers and thunderstorms across Georgia, across Alabama, Florida, and South Carolina for the next few days. We'll be watching for this system to develop potentially into a tropical or subtropical cyclone once it moves off the Atlantic coast here, probably by Wednesday. Just a quick look on radar. This is the center of circulation. You see it's actually fairly well defined on radar imagery. Plenty of tropical moisture streaming north with this system. So expect continued heavy rains, possible chance for a brief waterspout or tornado in these sort of nascent feeder bands, not quite organized enough to call them that yet, but they're at least some loosely organized rounds of showers and thunderstorms moving onshore here in parts of northern Florida. So, what are we going to be looking for from this system over the next few days? So, here it is this morning, or this afternoon rather, over southwestern Georgia. And you can see that it's going to basically stall out here in Georgia, South Carolina for a couple of days. So this is tomorrow afternoon. You see it's still poorly organized, overland, not developing into anything until it gets back over water. And that is likely going to happen by Wednesday evening. So this is Wednesday evening. And you can see that the center of the storm near the North Carolina, South Carolina border here, possibly just offshore. And at this point, it's going to be basically lopsided with most of the convection offshore. And we can also see that with the sort of simulated water vapor. I don't usually like to use these simulated satellite products, but I think that in this situation it gives you a good general idea of what the structure of this storm might be. And when it emerges over water, it's likely to be weighted a little bit to the east. And why is that? Well, this is where the fuel for thunderstorms is. This is where we have the warm Gulf Stream waters, and that's where the thunderstorms are going to want to develop. That's where they're going to have the fuel to develop. So you can see that by the time we get to Thursday morning, the center of the storm is going to be, at least as far as the sea level pressure field goes, it's going to be basically south of Cape Fear here. But most of the shower and thunderstorm activity is going to be east of Cape Hatteras. So this disconnect is going to be very interesting because if this system were to develop into a tropical cyclone, I think the most likely way it would do that is if this blob off to the east were basically to become the center, right? So long as the center of circulation is displaced from this thunderstorm activity, you're really going to have a hard time turning this into a tropical storm or a subtropical storm. But if the center can relocate under that blob of showers and thunderstorms, which could actually be quite intense, fairly persistent over the course of the day on Thursday, then I think that it has a real chance of developing into a tropical storm. So what else is going sort of in favor of this storm? Well, the sea surface temperatures are outrageously warm here. Over 29 C in the analysis from this morning across a pretty wide swath of the Gulf Stream just southeast of North Carolina. This is where we're watching for that storm to develop. So it's going to have plenty of energy. Normally, once we're approaching 28, 29 C, that's usually reserved for the deep tropics here. Gulf of Mexico will get that warm, but That's pretty high octane hurricane fuel. And while this is not expected to develop into a hurricane, those warm waters are certainly going to provide plenty of energy for this system to get going. So if it's able to relocate that center under that blob of thunderstorms that's likely to form over the Gulf Stream on Thursday, then I think that we could be talking about a mid-grade tropical storm. So what do I mean by that? Well, maximum sustained winds 50 to 55 miles an hour. And I do think that that's probably the upper limit of what this system is going to be capable of. It's going to be fighting some interference aloft, especially once we get into Friday and Saturday. But there's a brief window here where the environment is fairly favorable, right? So this is on Thursday morning here. So the environment here is fairly favorable. You can see that there's upper level divergence. So that means that we have these westerly winds coming in here, approaching the system, and then part of that wind, part of that airstream basically goes to the north, and part of it goes off to the south. And that branching, basically, of the winds aloft creates this vacuum. I mean, it's not really a vacuum. It's just an area of lower pressure. And air needs to be filling that area of lower pressure left by this divergence. And it does that by rising up from below. And that rising motion is how you're able to get thunderstorms. So I think that there's a window of opportunity for this to turn into a tropical cyclone on Thursday and Friday as it drifts slowly north. By the time you get to Friday afternoon, there's going to be this trough digging into the middle part of the country here. So ahead of this trough, you can see it in the 500 millibar height fields. It extends from just west of James Bay down through the Great Lakes and into the Mississippi Valley. And out ahead of that trough, you're going to start to get the southwesterly flow aloft, and that's going to start to shear the storm. Basically, it's going to tip it on its side, sort of, and again displace the thunderstorm activity from the center of circulation. That's exactly what's happening with Edouard this morning. It's located in that band of southwesterly flow aloft, and it's being sheared apart. So I think that's probably where this system is headed. You can even see it in the the simulated satellite imagery here. Again, don't take this too literally, but it's a good general idea that you're going to have this center of circulation probably somewhere northeast of the Outer Banks, just east of the Virginia Tidewater region, and then most of its shower and thunderstorm activity is going to be focused off to the east of that center. And I think that that's basically what we're going to see throughout the lifetime of this storm. So it's going to be steered to the northeast out ahead of that trough. You can see that trough over here, where you have that drier air aloft, sort of just to the west of this plume of moisture. And that trough is going to be steering the system up towards southern New England. And that's where it's going to be by the time we get to Saturday. So this is Saturday evening. You can see that the storm is centered southeast of Long Island. Most of its shower and thunderstorm activity extends from southeastern Massachusetts, Cape Cod, and then out into the Atlantic. So most of the heavy weather, quote unquote, associated with this system not going to be impacting land. But as it moves into the Gulf of Maine, it is going to be bringing plenty of tropical moisture with it. So precipitable water values in excess of 2 inches are marked off in red here. If you move into the darker reds, these purples, you're approaching 2.5+ inches. So that's a lot of moisture. That is well above normal, even for this time of year when we typically get more moisture. So there's going to be a big flash flooding threat with this system, and that is basically going to be focused from New York City, Hartford, Connecticut, Springfield, Massachusetts, and points east and northeast. So if you're out on Cape Cod, you should be thinking about some heavy rain on Saturday. Same with parts of southeastern Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and up into parts of New Hampshire and Maine. But overall, I don't think that this is going to be a system with major impacts. It doesn't quite have enough time to spin itself up into a stronger system. And if we go back to our sea surface temperature map, right, it has plenty of energy while it's east of the Outer Banks here. But as soon as it starts to move up off the New Jersey coast, off the Delmarva coast, and then as it moves towards Cape Cod, it's really going to lose a lot of that support from the ocean. So not worried about this turning into a hurricane or any type of strong system But it will be bringing plenty of tropical moisture north, so heavy rain expected for parts of New England this weekend. Believe it or not, that's actually a good thing. Aside from the spots that get too much too quickly, most of New England remains in mild to moderate drought conditions, so a soaking tropical rain would be good news for this area. So what else is there to keep an eye on in the tropical Atlantic? Well, this is the only other system currently highlighted by the Hurricane Center as having a chance of developing within the next 5 days. It's this little blob of shower and thunderstorm activity east-southeast of Barbados. You can see that it's embedded within the easterly trade winds, and there's plenty of dry air. This is another Saharan air layer outbreak, not quite as bad as the one that we had a couple weeks ago, but it is still quite dry and stable. You can see no shower or thunderstorm activity north of this system, and that sort of milky orangey tan color indicating the presence of significant dust. So that dry air likely to keep a damper on development. So not expecting anything to come of this system. By looking at ensembles, we can see that there's a brief window here where a few of the ensemble members suggest that this might develop into something as it approaches the Lesser Antilles, but none of them take the storm very far into the Caribbean as a coherent entity. So not worried about this system, but perhaps there's an outside chance that it develops into a tropical depression or maybe a weak tropical storm as it approaches the Lesser Antilles tonight. So how about the longer term forecast here? Going into the ensemble territory, we'll just start at the beginning because that'll be a nice way to tie all of these things together. So here's Edouard, southeast of Newfoundland, racing off to the northeast, not causing any problems except for the shipping lanes. We have a couple days of quiet here while that system festers over Georgia and South Carolina. It then emerges on Thursday with ensemble members disagreeing about exactly where it organizes, how strong it gets. But you can see that there's a good general consensus that something develops out of this system and then moves off to the northeast into New England. But once you see this whole mess of spaghetti, that's an indication that confidence is relatively low about the finer point details, how this system is going to play out. Once that sort of fades away slowly into next week, we return to quiet conditions here in the Atlantic, and I'll show you why in a second. We're not really expecting much in the way of activity through mid-July. You're getting absolutely no signal on the ensembles until we start to get into the later part of July. So once we start to get into July 20th and on, maybe now we're starting to see some more hints that activity could pick up again. Why are we seeing these patterns play out here? Well, this provides a great answer. This, of course, is the sort of background favorability for thunderstorm activity. And you can see that this is these are the areas in blue that are favored for tropical, upward motion, thunderstorm development, tropical cyclone development. So currently we're interested mostly in around 60 west. That's in the middle of the Atlantic. So currently we're in this area of broadly favorable conditions for upward motion tropical cyclone development. So that's why we're seeing Edouard formed in this envelope of favorable conditions. This system off the east coast in a few days is also going to have favorable conditions. And then we're also watching that system down near Barbados rather, which is getting a boost from this envelope of broad upward motion across the Atlantic. As we move into mid-July, say July 15th or so, we see this downward motion suppressed phase of the MJO moving in here as the support for thunderstorm activity pivots out into Africa. So we'll get this window of time, say from July 13th to July 19th or so, where there's a relatively unfavorable environment for thunderstorm development and thus tropical cyclone development in the Atlantic. By the time that we move towards July 20th, which is exactly when we saw that ensemble signal pick back up, we'll see those unfavorable conditions ease, and then the next round of more favorable conditions will drift in from the west. So Likely to see our current spurt of activity sort of die out in a week or so after the current systems that we're watching now fade away. Then we'll look for a quiet period in mid-July associated with this suppressed phase of the MJO, or convectively coupled Kelvin waves, for those who follow those. And then we'll probably see our intraseasonal base state become more favorable for development again in late July. So we're still early in the season, climatologically not expecting too much at this point, but we'll keep you updated as we move into August. Take this time while there's not all that much in the way of tropical cyclone activity to update your hurricane plans. Make sure you're ready if a storm does head your way later this year. That's it for me for now. Thanks for watching.